an attack on Iraq, which was something new. The reason the United States, it was a American Saudi attack on Iraq, and the attack was on PMF, Popular Mobilization Force, which is part of the Iraqi army and is different from, as we talked before coming to this live. You mentioned that it's different from Hashd al-Shabi, Hashd as they call it in Iraq. The reason they attacked Iraq, it was, the latest attacks on oil facilities in Saudi Arabia. They said that they had drone attacks, drones coming from Iraq attacking the oil facilities. If I'm not mistaken, the latest one, it was in Yanbu refinery, which was attacked. Then they said the Iraqi resistance, the Iraqi forces, PMF, came out and they had announced that they didn't do anything. It wasn't an attack on their part. We know that Yemen attacked before, and many people thought that it was Yemen, and and Saudi Arabia somehow confused or somehow didn't know who attacked them. That's why they're putting out that it was Iraq. And the whole case of the Iraq and Saudi Arabia is just somehow so confused. What is your understanding of this U.S. Saudi attack on Iraq? What do they want from attack? The other point that was happening last night was Iranian attack on Iraqi Kurdistan in the Erbil, which came at the same time they were attacking Iraq. Iran was attacking the Erbil, and Iranian attack on Jordan as well. It was a new, somehow preemptive attack on their part. Go ahead, your understanding of what has happened in Iraq.
So you mentioned several points here, and they require a little bit of explanation, if I may. First of all, it's important for people to distinguish between the Popular Mobilization Forces and the Iraqi militant groups. People normally say Popular Mobilization Forces, and mostly in the West, they do it on purpose, but there are not many people who understand the difference. They just mix them both. In 2014, when ISIS attacked Iraq and occupied a third of Iraq, I was there in Baghdad. This is when the Grand Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, the Sayyid Ali Sistani, the Grand Ayatollah in Iraq and the source of emulation, declared the jihad, but a jihad kifai, which means limited to the necessity and the needs of the situation to overcome a particular danger. This is when the Popular Mobilization Forces were created. When they went to the army, they went to all the groups that resisted against the American occupation forces because the army did not have the adequate training. They were trained by the Americans and NATO, and all these have left, most of them at least, but others remain in Kurdistan. So these groups became, the Popular Mobilization Forces became a mixture of many Iraqi groups who fought against the occupation forces because the US self-declared as an occupation force in Iraq. When they attacked ISIS and they managed to overpower ISIS, the Prime Minister, Haider Abadi, issued a decree saying that all the forces who are not under the legal Iraqi security forces should either deliver their weapons and dissolve themselves or join a new force called the Popular Mobilization Forces under the direct command of the Prime Minister. And later on, Prime Minister Adel Abdel Mahdi adopted this decree, and the Popular Mobilization Forces became regular Iraqi security forces under the command of the Prime Minister. Many groups dissolved themselves, others no, but many of these groups that dissolved themselves, they joined the Popular Mobilization Forces And of course, they have some influence over the groups that are inside these security forces. So Iraq is a particular case. Everyone has influence within a ministry or the army or the counterterrorism or the popular mobilization forces. So this is how Iraq is made. Now, what happened yesterday, the Americans and the Israelis, the Americans and the Saudis went to attack these particular forces. So they actually attacking the Iraqi security forces under the prime minister. And the area of attack is vast and is not a secret area. On the contrary, these are barracks and camps that are obvious, that are declared, and there's nothing secret about them. And they covered a whole area of Iraq from the north to the middle to the south. So we're talking about Bartella and Nineveh in the north. We're talking about the dips in Kirkuk in the close to Erbil. We're talking about Amirli in Salahuddin in a very strategic position where ISIS fought um, and did everything to control that area. They attacked the Muhammadawi camp in Diyala. They attacked Baghdad. They attacked Karbala and close to Karbala, Aoun. This is an area also where there is a camp. They attack Wasit. They attack Suwaira. They attack Adair in the Basra in the south on the Kuwaiti borders. So a very big area was under attack. Now, the Iraqi prime minister is caught in a very difficult position. First, he went to the US and said that he will disarm all the Iraqi armed group that are not under his command, which doesn't mean the popular mobilization forces, because these are already irregular forces. Now he is not going to be able to do so because there is an argument for the Iraqi group saying, well, we are still under the US occupation because the US forces are still in Erbil airport and in Al Harir military base in Kurdistan. Secondly, Iraq doesn't enjoy a sovereignty in its airspace and land. The Americans can do whatever they want, the Israelis can do whatever they want, and now the Saudis can do whatever they want. So the prime minister has lost the argument to say, well, there is no need, there are regular forces. When these regular forces any act of these regular forces means that it is the government of Iraq that is acting and can look very bad on this government when if local groups calling themselves militant or resistance or whatever act against the Saudis or the Americans or the Israelis, then it is easier for the government to detach itself. Secondly, in my humble opinion, I think the Saudis fell into the trap because now the closer relationship between the Iraqi prime minister, who carried a message from Donald Trump to the Iranian as a proposal of a ceasefire, is no longer in the best position at home because he cannot start attacking the Saudis. He will summon the Saudi ambassador at the maximum, but he is not going to go and attack Saudi Arabia and say, we've been under attack, we're going to attack you back. That means a declaration of war between Iraq and Saudi Arabia. Therefore, this will weaken the friend of Donald Trump. Secondly, it means the theater of war is enlarged. First, it was Iran, then Iran and Lebanon. Now, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Lebanon, and all the Gulf countries, including Jordan. Now we have Iraq, Yemen, Iran, Lebanon, the Gulf countries, and Jordan. So it is becoming larger and larger, which is not bad at the end of the day, because that will force uh, to find a solution to end this war. And the solution is going to be painful on the Americans because the Iranians are showing no flexibilities. They bombed US assets in Jordan today. even if Donald Trump said that he's not firing, but then hours later he fired on the borders between Erbil, Kurdistan, Iraq, and Iran. So we see the retaliation is still very shy from the Americans, but we also see a very clear challenge from the Iranians to the Americans saying, we will not accept that you decide when there is war and peace, and you decide when you stop. We also decide when we stop, and we're not stopping now.
Yeah. Do you think that with this attack, are we going to see a response from Iraq? I'm not talking about the government in Iraq, the Iraqi resistance responding to what has happened in Iraq, because if that could be the case, it it brings a new front for Saudi Arabia. We know that Saudi Arabia was somehow fighting, they were fighting with Yemen, and we know how fragile is their air defense system. They're not going to be able to defend themselves if these groups in Yemen and in Iraq decide to attack Saudi Arabia. And how is that going to change the situation for Saudi Arabia?
Well, your question is exactly the same. The point that I made is that Saudi Arabia fell into the trap, which means that the Iraqi groups will definitely retaliate because there are more than 20 people of the security forces who were killed and 33 wounded, and the number is increasing because, as I said, there are several locations that they have been hit, including training camps that have nothing to do with any operational activity against inside the country or outside. All the recruits are trained there. So inevitably there will be a retaliation, but not by the Popular Mobilization Forces because they cannot take the initiative without the order of the Prime Minister. So these groups will definitely retaliate. And this is where Saudi Arabia has poked the bear, really, and then just went not only against Yemen, but also against the Popular Mobilization Forces, that they have a huge advantage over Saudi Arabia in one thing, not by armament. No, the Saudis are better armed. They are supported by the Americans, and they will pay for the Americans for all the acts they are doing with them. But because these people have an ideology and they do not believe in defeat, they believe in sacrifices. And to threaten these people to kill them, it means taking them to what they believe in another better world. Inevitably, they're going to attack Saudi Arabia. It will be their pleasure to confront Saudi Arabia and make sure that the war is enlarged and is engaged on so many war theaters, including Iran, Lebanon, and Yemen, because the Yemeni announced that they were responsible, but the Saudis just rejected this claim. Therefore, yes, I think tonight, the Saudi Arabia will be attacked by the Iraqi groups who will not hesitate to claim their responsibility. These groups do not hide. They say when they do something against Israel or the Americans or the Saudis, and they know they are fully aware of the consequences. So my answer to your question is yes. Saudi will be more engaged. Saudi in a fragile situation where there is no selling of oil through the Strait of Hormuz without the Iranian agreement. And even with the Iranian agreement, if Iran cannot sell its oil, Saudis will not sell their oil. Through the Yombo on the Red Sea, the Saudis have already been attacked by the Yemeni, but even so, there is a limited amount of barrel of oil per day that the Suez Canal can transit because the oil need to transport it to the Egyptian and then from the Egyptian location prior the Suez Canal to the Mediterranean. So we're talking about a maximum of 400,000 to 500,000 barrels per day, which is extremely limited for the daily supply of oil or export of oil through Yomba that used to be between 3.5 million barrels per day to 4 million, 4.3 million barrels per day through the Red Sea, not the Strait of Hormuz.
I think two important points with when it comes to the case of Iraq, and one of them is the way, as you mentioned, the Saudi attack, the U.S. Saudi attack on Iraq somehow would unify the whole country, because with the recent visit of Prime Minister of Iraq, he went to the United States, and it seems that the United States is trying to make some sort of division in Iraq, as they did, for example, in Lebanon. You know, we know that difference between the government in Lebanon and Hezbollah, and they try to do the same in Iraq. But what is that? The attack is unifying the country. It's totally against what they were trying to do before. It's somehow, what is that? How can we understand that?
Lebanon is different from Iraq. In Iraq, the government, the majority is on the Shia, and they are the one who control the prime ministership, and the president is a kind of a prestigious position that belongs to the Kurds. So in Lebanon, the president is a Maronite representing the minority. All the Christians in Lebanon, not the Maronite, are between 11 to 13%, but the Christians are between 28 and 30%. And the Shia are between 30 to 33, and the Sunni are more or less the same. So we have a completely different situation in Iraq. And the decision of the Iraqi prime minister to disarm all the militant by the end of September is not going to hold because of this attack and because of the continuous attack that are going to come today, tomorrow, and in the next days and the next weeks if this war doesn't end. Now, the Saudis and the Americans carry out a joint attack because the Saudis want to distribute the responsibility, and they don't want the Iraqis to think that this is a sectarian attack, Sunni versus the Shia. They making it in a way like the Americans when they go to war, they ask Europe and NATO to join, so the world would not look at them like the Americans versus this country or that country. So this is the aim of the Saudis, to avoid this sectarianism approach with Iraq, and to say we're doing it with the Americans, and the Americans are neither Sunni nor Shia. So we're attacking you because you attacked us, but they attacked the wrong target, like the Americans have been doing in Iraq for the last decades. They always go and attack Hashd al-Shabi because the other groups are resistance groups, they call themselves. Therefore, they don't have obvious location where they have their training camps and barracks. They don't. So the Americans go against the official barracks of the Iraqi army. But the point is, the Iraqi government never has taken position against the United States for violating a sovereignty, because the selling of oil, of which 90% of the Iraqi budget depends on, falls immediately into the US federal bank before it bounces back, according to the US will, to Iraq again to receive the dollars and to receive their own money. Therefore, the Iraqi government is caught by this triangulation of selling oil, federal bank in the US, and then Baghdad to receive the final assets of their own assets. So because of that, Iraq feels hesitant to confront the United States in anything. And the first step Iraq should do is to pull out of this link and this triangulation and go independent using other coverage than the US dollar.